I call this meeting to order. We are meeting in public. I would love to welcome the honorable members. I hope every one of you had a good time with your constituents and your family, and I'm looking forward to a great session moving forward. Two of the members here are subbing today. I would love to welcome Mr. Mark Dalton from beautiful British Columbia, and my dear friend Heather McPherson from my old hometown from Alberta. Welcome to continuation of meeting number 106 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration to discuss draft letter regarding the government's response to final report of Special Committee on Afghanistan. Avoiding audio and feedback. This is the last time I will be saying. Before we begin, I would ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the tables. I guess they are not here yet, are they?
Yeah, the card, but the new one.
Is up?
Yeah.
Is this the one? Okay, that's good. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the hard-working interpreters. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. I would like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chairs. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can. Thank you all for your cooperation. Echoing? Okay, we're trying to fix. I'll take a just short break. Let me see if it's fixed. Is it all taken care?
No, we're having a separate
sheet. I have to suspend the meeting for a few minutes for technical reasons. Order back to Afghanistan letter and press release. As you all know, the discussion regarding the draft letter was previously done in camera. I would ask all members to be careful about disclosing information that have been decided or discussed in camera. We are discussing the motion of Mr. McLean. The motion, the committee want me to read the motion? Or you want me to read the motion? Okay. The motion. Read the motion. The motion is the following: that regarding the draft letter concerning the government's response to the final report of the Special Committee on Afghanistan as sent to committee members on May 21st, 2024, the paragraphs numbered 19, 20, and 23 be deemed adopted without amendment, that the letter and the news release be then deemed adopted, that the chair be then instructed to transmit the letter to Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship on the second business day following the adoption of this motion, that the chair then issue the news release on behalf of the committee immediately upon transmitting the letter to the minister, that the letter and the news release be then posted to committee's website, and that the study be deemed concluded. At the time of the suspension on Monday, June the 17th, Mr. Chang had the floor. Following were on the list to debate the motion after Mr. Chang, MP El Khoury, and MP Kaibaga. Mr. Chang, I know you had a good rest and you are prepared to have a shorter speech today. And floor is yours. Mr. Chang, go ahead, please. Point of order, Mr. Reddycop.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, welcome back.
Thank you.
I have written down a different order of speaking on this, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm confused why this is, because I had Mr. Chang, then myself, then I believe Mr. Brunel Desep, and then Mr. Kwan, and then Ariel Kaibaga, and then El Khoury, and then Tom Commits. That's the list that I had.
Sorry, let me handle this.
Isn't it that, like, flip it over? Because I think I was even in the chair for a part of this.
It was the discussion before we debated the motion.
Okay. That was about the discussion before the motion. That was Mr. McLean, then Mr. Chang, Reddycop, Ali, Kwan, Kaibaga, El Khoury, and Mr. Commit.
Okay.
But this is different. That's what the clerk is telling me.
So that was for what again?
Mr. Clerk, you want to handle this? Because you kept this, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So I have the list from the last, and this is the list of people who wanted to speak on the motion. So we had Mr. Chang, and two were dashed, and then there was Mr. El Khoury and Ms. Kaibaga.
And are we not on the motion?
Well, not from the list here. I think there was two names.
No.
But
Let me rephrase. Are we not dealing with the motion right now?
Yes, we are.
yes, we are.
So would we not follow that list on the other side?
No, this is the list for the motion.
Motion.
And it was the debate of, it was the people who wanted to intervene to the discussion on the letter before the motion was put on the
see.
floor.
Okay,
Okay. You happy?
I'm happy.
Thank you, Mr. Reddycop. So with this, we'll go to Mr. Chang. Mr. Chang, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome back. And thank you to all members that are here. I hope you all had a good summer. Personally, it was a fantastic summer for me, and I'm happy to be back to work for the citizens of Markham Unionville that has elected me to be here to do the good work of government. So on saying that, I want to get back to the Afghan letter that we stopped on June 17th when I last spoke about it. And last time when I was speaking on it, I was speaking about Ambassador Sir's provided further details about the government's contingency planning and the core assessment that were informing decision-making at the time. He said, up until a few days before the decision to temporarily suspend embassy operations, Canada and the international community were expecting difficult times in August and September, but not a complete takeover of the capital. In fact, we expected the Afghan military to defend the city until the onset of winter, allowing time for negotiations to continue. With this in mind, we were considering options to maintain a skeletal presence throughout the fall so we could continue essential programming as well as support possible evacuation efforts. With the support of the Special Advisory Team from the Canadian Armed Forces, we were able to continually update our concept of operation for maintaining a presence in the country to a temporary suspension of operations and implementation of a non-combatant evacuation operation. This team was also instrumental in securing space in the air bridge that became an essential bridge for getting so many people out of the capital. So commenting on the extent and pace of evacuation efforts that Canada had carried out prior to the collapse of the Afghan Republic, Ambassador Sears indicated that planning for a special immigration measures policy went back into March of 2021. He also commented that the Republic's authorities had started barring people who did not have passports or the Afghan Tazikars, national identity card, on the plane. Those constraints reflected a larger political context, according to Ambassador Sears, wherein the president of the Afghan Republic did not want Afghans leaving because he felt that there would be a brain drain. And we retorted that we needed to have part of the brain come with us so that they could come back and build the country later on. Minister Anand echoed this point, noting that the former Afghan government was concerned that a mass exodus of people would signal a lack of confidence among its citizens. Looking back on these events, testimony and information provided by other witnesses suggested that signs may have been missed in time to evacuate people when more options were available may have been lost. The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, was asked about the contingency planning it was doing for Afghanistan and the region, which was completed in December 2020 and shared with governments, including the Government Canada, in early 2021. The document noted that the situation of Afghanistan, including a complex peace process and the withdrawal of international forces and a volatile security environment, has given rise to an unpredictable trajectory. The UNHCR was preparing for two possible scenarios. The first was increased internal displacement caused by escalating conflict, political instability, and a stalled peace process. The second scenario was heightened conflict and a breakdown of the peace process, which would saturate the absorption capacity of communities, resulting in exponential internal displacement and outflow of Afghans seeking international protection in neighboring countries. When asked whether action should have been taken earlier, Stephen Peddle, who retired from the Canadian Armed Forces as a senior intelligence officer with the rank of major, replied, "The moment that President Donald Trump announced to the world that America was leaving Afghanistan, I think anyone who was in Afghanistan knew the writing was on the wall as to what was going to happen. The question was when, and then President Biden gave a date. There were lots of opportunities long before July or August of 2021 to bring all the Afghans who helped us, who we had records of, over to Canada. There is no excuse whatsoever for us to have waited until August 2021 when we knew that Afghanistan was folding. There's no excuse whatsoever for waiting so long. Wasma Farooq, founder of the Women and Peace Studies Organization, Afghanistan, told the special committee that the collapse of the Afghan Republic and the fall of Kabul to the Taliban didn't just happen overnight. In her view, the 2020 agreement between the United States and the Taliban, and not 15th August 2021, was the start of Afghanistan's political surrender. With the Doha Agreement, she said, legitimacy was given to the Taliban, while representatives from the Afghan republics were not included as signatories. That was, she said, when things started getting much worse in local communities. Major General retired David Fraser referenced a letter that he and others sent in early July 2021 to the implicated ministers, asking them to create a pipeline to evacuate vulnerable Afghans. In his view, if 3 retired generals without access to intelligence saw this coming in July, there could have been a lot more people evacuated out of Afghanistan before Kandahar fell and before Kabul fell. That was not the only letter that was sent or appeal that was made. Wendy Long, director of Afghan Canadian Interpreters, has started writing letters in November 2018 to Canada's then Minister of Immigration, Ahmed Hussein. She told the special committee, as Doha peace talks progress, the pleas for an immigration process mounted and concerns started coming in from veterans worried about those left behind. Some veterans had spent thousands of dollars in attempts to get interpreters here without results, adding to their mental anguish. After compiling files on Afghans who had been part of Canadian mission, Wendy Long's organization and 15 other international advocacy groups sent an open letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on 1st June 2021, as well as to the then Minister of Immigration, Marco Mendicino, then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Marc Garneau, then Minister of National Defense, Harjit Sajjan, and other NATO leaders. The letter warned that time was running out to protect NATO's local Afghan Afghan allies. Furthermore, the signatory suggested that in addition to the people who had played a direct role supporting military and diplomatic mission, there was also growing concern for people who were associated with the larger project of building democracy and advancing women's rights. In the larger project of building democracy and advancing women's rights in Afghanistan. These concerns were reflected in a letter that was written to Minister Mendicino on behalf of the Afghan Women Association, Refugees and Immigrant Services. Asma Fazi, the organization's president, explained that they had been approached by women parliamentarians and activists from inside Afghanistan concerning the dire situation they were in. Dated 26 July 2021, the letter urged the Canadian government to take immediate action to protect Afghan women and girls, since the situation had taken a darker turn with the withdrawal of U.S. and NATO military forces. Furthermore, the letter communicated the organization understanding that the Taliban had reoccupied more than half of Afghanistan and the gains that have been made in the past 20 years, particularly by women, and now are at dire risk. Evacuating Canada's Afghan allies and the process involved. During a meeting in June 2021 with Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, Wendy Long's organization stressed that we needed a fast and effective means to get people assessed initially and then more completely processed in either Canada or elsewhere. We stressed that there was no time or money for passports if people didn't already have them, and we recommended a refugee-type approach. Most applicants had no access to laptop or printers, and any process would have had to be cell phone-based, since any other method would expose the applicant's identity, theft, and fraud or debt. Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn debate.
There is a motion, non-debatable, on the floor to adjourn the debate. All in favor? Anyone opposed?
J'aimerais avoir.
I would like to have a roll call, Mr. Chair, if possible.
I'll ask clerk to take the vote, please. Go ahead.
Should I go, sir?
Yes.
Can I go?
Go, please.
So to adjourn debate, the motion to adjourn, the question is to adjourn the debate on the motion of Mr. McLean. Mr. Ali? Yes?
Just say yes or no. Yes.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Monsieur El Khoury? Yes. Madame Kayabaga?
Pour.
Ms. Zaid?
Yes.
Mr. Kimich? Yes. Mr. McGuire? No, I'm sorry, Mr. Dalton?
Oui.
Mr. McLean?
Oh, oui.
Mr. Ridicop?
Yes.
Monsieur Brunel Duceppe?
Non, mais non.
Ms. McPherson?
No.
So yeas 9, nays 2.
The adjournment carried. I have the speaking list. I have Mr. Chiang, then Madam Kaibaga, and Mr. Kimich. Okay, so Mr. Chang, floor is with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce a motion at this time.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Number one, which list are you speaking of? Because Mr. Chang just gave up the floor, so somebody has to follow.
Yeah, then I see the hands up. There was Chang, Kaibaga, and Mr. Kimich.
I thought at the beginning of the meeting that the clerk told us that there was a list following this motion, that there was a list of people that were on the speaking list. Am I incorrect?
It's adjournment.
That wasn't to do with this.
Point on, Mr. President. Point on, Mr.
One person
President.
at a time.
Point on, Mr. President.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we have great interpreters who have to do their work in a safe manner. So if everyone speaks at the same time and mics are being turned on and off, then that makes their work very, very hard. So it's thanks to our interpreters that we are able to do our work. So I am going to ask for respect for the people who are working with us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brunel Duceppe. One person at a time. Mr. McLean, you had the floor.
I think I've made my point. Is there a speaking list that's superseded after the adjournment?
No.
I thought there was a
No,
speaking list.
this is a new list, and these three honorable members are on the list: Mr. Chang, Madam Kaibaga, and Mr. Kumich. Anyone else, they can raise their hand. I'll put it on the list. Okay, Mr. Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for members across for your participation. I would like to take this time to read a notice of motion. And the motion given that the former conservative government under Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the Minister of Citizenship, Immigration and Multiculturalism, Jason Kenney, amended the Citizenship Act to impose the first-generation limit. The Ontario Superior Court of Justice found this legislative amendment unconstitutional as it violates charter rights, specifically on the grounds of mobility and equality rights. The leader of the opposition stated that he would use the notwithstanding clause if given the chance. The first generation limit is another example of the Conservative Party stripping away rights of Canadians. The Immigration Committee has extensively studied the topic of lost Canadians. The Member of Parliament for Calgary Forest Lawn, who is the sponsor for the Senate Public Bill S-245, as well as the former Conservative immigration critic, recommended the introduction of a private member bill or a government bill to address the remaining cohort of lost Canadians. That the chair report to the House of Commons that, notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, Bill C-71, an act to amend the Citizenship Act, be deemed read a second time and referred to this committee.
Okay.
Can you move the motion, Mr. Chair?
Any discussion? So, Madam Kaibaga, Mr. Bruno Duceppe, and Mr. Kumich, and Mr. McLean, and Mr. Redkop. Okay. So, Madam Kaibaga, floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would also take the opportunity to welcome my colleagues back to Parliament. As I said to some of them, I'm very excited to be here and to do the great work that our constituents have sent us to do. In terms of the motion that my colleague just eloquently moved, I just want to add the importance of it and talk about the importance that Canadian citizenship provides all Canadians with a deep sense of belonging and diverse and democratic country that we are, that we get to call home. And I want to point out that in 2009, and I think earlier in the House when we were debating this motion, one of my colleagues talked about why she ran. And I kind of want to circle back on that because that is one of the reasons why I turned to politics as an avenue of advocating for my community members and the many people who do not get the opportunity to be here to take part of legislative activities and make sure that their voices are heard. In 2009, there was a legislative amendments that was made by the Harper Conservatives, creating the Citizenship Act that currently restricts citizenship by descent for the first generation born abroad. I mean, there was many citizenship acts that were made that prevented many Canadians to act as Canadians and to be sort of falling into the system of second-class citizens. And many of us were revolted by the idea. And I think if I can speak for myself and other colleagues who have expressed this same sentiment, we ran because we did not want to see the Conservatives continue to make double classes of citizenship in Canada. Not only does this leave out those who have a genuine connection to Canada, who are born from Canadian parents, but it's unacceptable. It has unacceptable consequences for Canadians whose children were born outside of the country. We introduced this legislation to remove the first generation limit and extend Canadian citizenship to the lost Canadians. Talking about who has the right to identify as a Canadian, it actually goes against our charter rights. So I'm pleased to see my amazing colleague moved this motion, and for us to debate about it and to talk about why it's important to restore the status of lost Canadians, to eliminate the first generation limit, and to remove this second class of citizens. Left to the Conservatives, many Canadians will find themselves in a second class citizenship sector. And that's why we were elected. That's why we're here, to advocate on behalf of many Canadians who don't have that opportunity to voice for themselves. We've worked quite extensively with a lot of community members who are impacted by this legislation that was passed by Harper's Conservatives and actually the leader of the Conservatives right now, Pierre Poilievre, to make sure that we can restore the sense of citizenship, the sense of belonging, and the diversity and the democratic in our democratic country. So I'm very happy to see that this motion is moving forward. I'm very happy to hear many colleagues from different parts of the spectrum of parties, whether it's the Bloc Québécois or the NDP or the Green Party. They've all been advocating to make sure that Canadians remain Canadians, Canadians are Canadians, without having to have a tier level of who's considered a good Canadian or not a good Canadian. So I'm happy to continue to hear the thoughts of all of my colleagues, but I just want to point out that this was moved by the Harper government in 2009 with the current leader as a member who adopted this legislation. So I think it's important that we highlight that point, because if left to him, he wants to continue to create second-class citizens. And unfortunately for him, he's going to continue to create more politicians like myself who are going to fight to the end to make sure that the Canadian rights, the charter rights, is protected. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Kaibaga. Mr. Bruno Duceppe, and then Mr. Kimmich afterwards.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know that this former S-245 and now C-75 is important to me because when Quebec becomes a country, the number of people who will have Quebec citizenship will go up with the number of people who are being rejected Canadian citizenship. So maybe someone might answer my question. This motion, I think it's been the notice was given a while ago. So if there's a vote in the chamber on the issue, what happens to this motion is my first question. And if possible, I don't know if it is possible, but I would like to introduce an amendment to the end of the motion, a friendly amendment, if it is accepted. After that it be considered deemed read a second time, I would add the following. I wrote the text, but after the committee has finished its report on closed work permits. The idea here being, and I will remind you of the discussion we had at the end of the previous parliamentary session. We had a new draft from the analysts before beginning this week's work, and I'd like to congratulate our analysts on that. So that was a document, that was some work on closed work permits, that we had the draft from the analysts. Now we worked on it, and I think we owe it to ourselves to finish this study. And that is very important for many people, and we spent a lot of time on that study, and I find it very close to my heart. And I think many people are waiting for us to finish that study on closed work permits. So if it is okay, we should prioritize certain things, but focus on closed work permits study and get that done with, because we don't know when we will find ourselves in an election period. So I would like some priority to be given to the closed work permits study. If anyone wants to answer my question on the first point, if there's a vote in the chamber on C-71, what do we do with this motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno Duceppe. First question is, this was brought forward on Monday, June the 17th, 2024. That's the date you asked me. And the second thing is, because committee determines its own business, right? The motion is in order and is here. So it's up to the committee members to study this motion, because we cannot control what's happening in the parliament. but we can only control what's happening here in committee. Mr. Bruno Duceppe.
Excusez.
Well, in that case, my friendly amendment, would it be accepted by Mr. Chang? As I was saying,
Oui,
you
je
read
peux
it?
le relire. Je l'ai.
I can reread it. We will send it to you too, in both official languages. So it says, just in addition to the end, that it be deemed read a second time and sent to the committee.
Dernier est terminé. Ouais. Vous me donnez.
If we can have a brief suspension, I can send it.
Okay, meeting is briefly suspended. call the meeting back to order, and we have a motion as amended by Mr. Brunel de Sepp. Mr. Chang, you okay with his friendly amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm good with that. Just the only thing I was asking about the closed work permit wording to make sure that they're acceptable, and we can go from there.
Can you? Thank you. So basically, you're telling me that it's where it said at the end closed permits, it should read as closed work permits. Okay. Okay. So we have sorry, Mr. Redkop. Yes.
Thank you. I don't disagree with this, but I think what the wording we're looking for is, if I look at the report that was sent to us by the analysts on this subject, the subject line is closed work permits and temporary foreign workers. I think that's the wording we're looking for, because that would sync in with, the actual report that we're looking at.
Okay, Mr. Brunel, you okay with that?
Oui, on a fait ça assez rapidement sur le fly. Comme
Yeah, sure. We did that quickly on the fly, and we are okay to use the terminology from the report, of course.
Okay.
It's a sub-amendment, so we have to do it by the process, recorded division,
Sure.
to add the correct wording.
Okay, can we have Mr. Redkop has the floor to sub-amendment for a sub-amendment. Could you read your sub-amendment, please?
I have one other question before I do that. And I think we discussed this. It says his report. We're going with its report, right? Okay. So my sub-amendment is to replace the words closed work permits with closed work permits. Sorry, replace the words closed permits with closed work permits and temporary foreign workers.
Okay. So the sub-amendment motion as sub-amended by Mr. Redkop is on the floor, and I have Mr. Kmitch. You are on the next one on the list, right? We can.
Sorry, Chair, I believe I was speaking on the main motion.
Okay.
As I was just asking for recorded division when the time comes.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the sub-amendment? Madam Kwan, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I apologize. I came a little late to the committee. I was upstairs in the main chamber debating Bill C-71, precisely related to this very motion. And I guess there's an element of the sub-amendment to which we're talking about. Very interestingly, at the end of my speech, Mr. Chair, I actually moved the motion that said that notwithstanding any standing order, special order, usual practice of the House, Bill C-71, an act to amend the Citizenship Act be deemed read a second time and refer to the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Now, that is a unanimous consent motion, so that it would require all members of the House in support of it. And interestingly, it was the Conservatives who said no to my motion. So here we are.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Order,
Sorry,
Mr. McLean.
You'll rule if that's appropriate or not. Unanimous consent, it does not require who is actually not providing unanimous consent in the House of Commons. It is just anonymous, and I'm not sure who wasn't giving unanimous consent. I'm not sure Ms. Kwan was sure about who was not giving unanimous consent.
I'm up.
Yes, sorry. Madam Kwan.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm absolutely sure who it was because I was sitting right in the chamber watching all of this, and there was one member who actually said no, who then subsequently got up to ask the question. All of that, by the way, is on my speeches on the public record. But to the point here, with respect to this particular motion, and I have to say, I mean, it should be no surprise to folks around this table because it was the Conservatives who filibustered Bill S-245.
Point of order again, Mr. Chair.
Point of order again here, Mr. McLean.
Unanimous consent requires Parliament's approval, and that means unanimous consent of Parliament. So it's Parliament that didn't give unanimous consent. It doesn't matter who in Parliament didn't give unanimous consent. It's Parliament. If the chair or the Speaker recognized one person saying they didn't get unanimous consent, that is the equivalent of several people saying it, and several people may have said it, and I apologize that Ms. Kwan may be picking on one member that she saw say it, but that person speaks for all of Parliament to uphold the rules of Parliament.
One person at a time, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McLean.
Yeah, I know. I know
Now,
what.
Madam Kwan, let's get to work.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay.
I know what the Conservatives, of course, is trying to do, to say that, no, they're not standing in the way, but the record speaks for itself. And as we saw in Bill S-245, the Conservative bill filibustered that bill for 30 hours. And then even after it got through committee here and was reported to the House with amendments, the Conservatives, the member from Calgary Forest Lawn, refused to bring the bill up for third reading 8 times and moved it back in the order of precedence 8 times. So I'm not surprised in terms of where we're at with respect to that. So with respect to this particular motion, Mr. Chair, this is something that I've been trying to motivate for a very long time. And the motivation behind all of that is to say that the law needs to be corrected. The unconstitutional elements of particularly the second generation born abroad provisions that disallow them to have access to citizenship conferred to them from their parents needs to be rectified, as has been indicated by the Ontario Superior Court, Mr. Chair. So it is not only the morally right thing to do, it is the legally right thing to do, and as required by law. On the sub-amendment, on the close work permit study, and this is a study to which my good colleague here, MP Alexis Bruno-Duceppe, had brought before this committee, to which I had made an amendment to, and that is to really address the findings of the UN rapporteur on modern slavery, and for Canada to properly address that issue. And so I would be happy to work expeditiously to see that work finished so that we can get on to other business, including, of course, Bill C-71 at committee stage and other items as well, including the Afghan letter to which there is a grave injustice that's taken place with respect to the Afghan situation, and I was surprised that the Conservatives would actually agree to adjourn the debate on having that letter and the motion contained in that letter be voted on at this committee.
Thank you, Madam Kwan. Any more list? There's no speakers. And we can take a vote on the motion as sub-amended by Mr. Reddycop. All in favor? Sorry. Sub-amendment.
Yeah, just on the sub-amendment.
Sub-amendment. Just the sub-amendment, not the motion. Yeah,
recorded
sorry.
division, please.
Yeah, recorded division. So there's a recorded division call. I will ask the clerk to take a vote on the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Reddycop.
Mr. Ali? Yes. Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Monsieur El-Khoury? Madame Kayabaga? Ms. Zaid?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmich?
Yes.
Mr. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Oui.
Mr. Reddycop?
Yes?
Mr. Bruno-Duceppe?
Oui.
Ms. Kwan?
Yes.
Okay, motion, the sub-amendment on the motion brought forward by Mr. Reddycop is carried. So now we are back to motion as sub-amended. List of speakers, Mr. Kimmich. Pardon? Down to amendment, yes.
So, Chair, after hearing the partisan attacks on the Conservative position on C-71, I'm going to move the following motion because I think it's first day, so let's start with what we all expected as I guess the session is going to become. So this is my amendment after the title.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think we're working on the amendment, but you're moving a motion.
Merci.
Okay, great.
Ça va?
Another sub-amendment?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Committee, you have the floor.
So after this title, this is my amendment I propose, comma, and after a carbon tax election is held so that Canadians and the Quebecois can vote out this tired, comma, out of time, comma, NDP Liberal coalition government.
Okay, so we have
I'm happy to speak to it too. Think,
point of order, Madam Kaibal.
Is this in order? Because we still had a motion
Yes, any amendment can be brought forward,
as a motion. So,
and it's up to the committee.
but this is completely different from the current motion. Is this in
Amendment,
standing?
it can be, members have every right to bring in a sub-amendment. It's up to the
But this
committee.
is not a sub-amendment, Chair. With all due respect, this is not a sub-amendment.
It's
This
amendment
is
to the-
a complete different motion from what we are
point of
kind
order.
of discussing right now. I'm still on my point of
Okay,
order, so
thank
I'd
you,
like an
and
answer.
I will give floor to Mr. Kmitch.
Sorry, Chair. I was going to say I hadn't given up my time, and it sounded like debate because this is totally in order. My motion is basically doing a time delay, which is what the previous amendment, the one we're debating right now, and now we're on a sub-amendment. The amendment that Mr. Brulé-Duceppe proposed is basically affecting the timing of the main motion. And so what I'm doing is I'm affecting the timing of what would happen when this is reported out of this committee back to the House, which is would only take effect after a carbon tax election is held. Because frankly, what I heard at the doors across the country, and I went to the Greater Toronto region, I went to Vancouver, I went to Burnaby, North Vancouver, I went to Seymour, I went to all those places, including places outside of Toronto like Hespeler, and that's what I heard at the doors. At least half the doors, people want to talk about the carbon tax and the impact it's having on their bottom line every single month. So what this sub-amendment is simply doing is just time. It's basically establishing when the main motion takes effect. And I think it would be perfectly reasonable for Canadians to have a say and have a say now the way they want it. You can see it in the polls, Chair. I'm sure you follow them like all of the political class does. We all do it. We all check the polls, whether we go on 338 Canada or we're going on to any other websites like Abacus or Leger, and we're checking what the polls are, usually in our ridings. I know that I'm sure in Surrey the polls are affected as well, Chair. And we're all checking the polls all the time because we're always wondering what the Canadians are thinking. And right now what they're thinking is they'd like a carbon tax election. What they want is for their pocketbooks at the end of the month to be have more money in their pockets. They want to have a lighter load and the carbon tax not being imposed on everything that they purchase at the grocery stores, when they go to the pump to buy gasoline or buy diesel, whenever they're going.
Sir, yes, I would like to ask the clerk through you. Is it legal to move a motion when we are debating a motion? Can you illustrate that for us, please?
Mr. El-Khoury, this is a sub-amendment to the motion. This is not a new motion. Another point of order from Madam Kaibaga.
I would like to challenge that because maybe the clerk can help us. This is a new motion, completely different from what we are talking about, and it's moved as a sub-amendment, but it doesn't match the current motion, and it's irrelevant to the main motion. And if I can read just a little bit of the rules, maybe you can help me with this, clerk. It says here that if it deals with a matter with a matter foreign to the main motion, it exceeds its scope 30 or introduces a new proposition, which should properly be the subject of a separate substantive motion with notice. I don't think that this motion that's been moved is relevant to the current motion that we're talking about, and it's taking us completely to a different route. So I'd like to challenge your chair on that it's not appropriate.
The challenge is the point of order before the challenge.
Sorry,
is challenged.
there is no challenge, Chair, and there is no challenge because you allowed me to commence debate, which means
But
you
we're challenging the
accepted
chair.
the
We
ruling.
can
You
challenge.
accepted my sub-amendment to the main motion, which is basically establishing when the main report with this amendment would take effect. That's all I'm doing here. I'm proposing a different condition on the main amendment. You accepted it and allowed me to start debate, which means you can't challenge it after the fact. The moment to challenge would be in the moment that it's proposed, would be to eliminate it. That is in the Green Book.
Hold on one second.
Before you accepted it, Chair, I did make a comment, and you sort of moved on from the comment that I made, and so.
Just hold on. I'm going to suspend the meeting for a few
you.
seconds here before I come back.
Yeah, we can also challenge.
Back to order, and my ruling stands that the sub-amendment is in order. Madam Kaibaga.
Thank you, Chair. Can we get the wording of this new motion circulated in both languages, please? Thanks.
Suspend again and distribute it.
Okay. Suspended. to order. Hopefully, members received the sub-amendment and floor is with Mr. Comich.
Thank you, Chair. You looked very downcast when you said I still had the floor. So to continue the point I was making before we suspended in order to be able to have the wording of the motion sent to all members of the committee in both official languages, I think it's just time. I think this timing on a condition on the main amendment, on the main motion, would offer up the opportunity to send this to the House at the appropriate moment. We've seen over the summer the costs have gone up for a lot of people. I think that what I heard at the doors very clearly, both in my riding and also outside my riding when I was door knocking, was that people are just tired of this government and they want to vote it out. They want to have an opportunity to have their say. And I don't see why we should continue to block them from doing that. As the leader of the official opposition has said, the moment that we can, we will move a motion of non-confidence in the government. You'll note I didn't put that into this as a sub-amendment, but that would have been quite the motion to send back to the House of Commons to consider. And very simply, you have many premiers now calling for the end of the carbon tax, including a premier whose party was one of the first in Canada to introduce it, Premier David Eby of British Columbia. And I went through British Columbia for about 2 weeks backpacking with my kids through southern British Columbia. And yeah, costs are really high. That was a complaint I heard again. Many people just complaining it offhand while they were sitting in different restaurants, while they were just walking on the street looking at prices. And now even the Premier of British Columbia is calling for an end to the carbon tax, saying that if there wasn't a backstop in the federal legislation, they would do away with it. And the reason he's doing that is very obvious, is that there is a provincial election coming in British Columbia, and it is so unpopular that he has no chance of being reelected at this point. And we also, I think, saw a most unusual political situation in British Columbia where an entire political party collapsed. That used to be called the BC Liberals, then they did a rebrand, it didn't quite work out. And now they have one force that is behind a carbon tax election as well. And that's the wording that they're using as well, because again, the majority of Canadians want to see the abolishment of the carbon tax because it costs them a lot of money. Back home in Alberta, you're talking about thousands of dollars out of everyone's pocket, regardless of the income quartile that you are in, whether you're in the bottom 20% or top 20%. Everybody's paying more than used to, and the carbon tax is set to increase April 1st. So I think by sending this,
thank you, Chair. I'm listening intently to make sure that there is no relevancy going on here, but we're not talking about carbon tax, and we were originally talking about lost Canadians, and now we're on carbon tax. Like, what? I'm so confused. How is this relevant to the current motion?
This is relevant to the sub-amendment that Mr. Comich brought in, and Mr. Comich, floor yours. Mr. Comich, floor yours.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm happy to read back the motion. So there was the main motion, there's an amendment, and there's my sub-amendment. So my sub-amendment follows after the addition of the closed work permit study being completed. I added the words, and after a carbon tax election is held so that Canadians and Quebecois can vote out this tired, out-of-time NDP Liberal coalition government. It's very simple. It's germane. I'm speaking to my sub-amendment on what I heard at the doors and what people want us to do as parliamentarians, which is submit ourselves to the greatest bit of accountability our democracy has, which is let Canadians have a say, let them vote us out if they don't think we're doing individually a good enough job in our local ridings. And then it's based on both your political leadership, it's based on your political party, but it's also based on the quality of the representation that you do. What I heard at the doors in my riding of Calgary Shepherd repeatedly was the costs are too high, the carbon tax is imposing too much of a burden on everyday Canadians. So I think by offering this sub-amendment to the main motion, we're just time limiting when this would go back to the House and the impact it would have on C-71 and the other bits of the legislation. So I think it's time, and I hope that the Liberals will see the wisdom in this and submit themselves to accountability and let the Canadian public decide.
Thank you. Mr. Comich, Mr. Radikop, then Mr. McLean, and then Mr. Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to speak to this sub-amendment. And just so that we're clear, we have this motion regarding Bill C-71, and we have already sub-amended it once, and we are looking to sub-amend it again. And as my colleague pointed out, it puts essentially a condition on what this motion says. And I think it is also very important based on what I heard this summer as I spoke with constituents not only in Saskatoon but in other parts of the country. And I can tell you that the carbon tax is very much disliked in Saskatoon. I hear this constantly from people. I hear the interesting part is that people have figured out that the carbon tax is actually the main driver of inflation and the cost of items in the city of Saskatoon.
Okay. Madam Kaibaga, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I appreciate that my colleagues started on the right path by talking about C-71, which is what we're talking about right now, lost Canadians, and then went back to carbon tax. Again, I fail to see the relevancy here on the main motion and the main matter that we're
Thank you,
talking
Madam
about right now.
Kaibaga. And Mr. Reddycop, please continue.
Okay. I understand that it's sometimes difficult, so I'll just read the motion again just so it's very clear. So, there's the part in the motion about what we do about C-71, and then this part which would say, and after a carbon tax election is held, so that Canadians and Quebecois can vote out this tired, out-of-time Liberal, NDP Liberal coalition government. That is the sub-amendment. And the point of the sub-amendment is a timing issue on this motion, and it is to recognize the fact of what I was saying, that as I speak to people, that they are concerned about the carbon tax and the effect that the carbon tax is having on their costs. And what I find very interesting is that, people are connecting the carbon tax to all of their expenses. And it's not just connecting it to the price of gasoline or the price of diesel fuel. It's not even just connecting it to the price of natural gas to heat your house or heating oil to heat your home. It's people understand how it affects truckers, for example. And truckers pay a lot of money for their carbon tax.
Madam Kaibaga, continue.
Mr. Chair, again, I go back to the point that Mr. Kimmage is saying that C-71 is not important to them. We get that, and they don't want it to come to committee, but we want to talk about...
And I'm going to carry on with Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Reddycop, please go ahead.
So what I was saying was that people have gone beyond connecting the carbon tax to increase fuel costs, increase home heating costs, but also have recognized that beyond those two things, which are significant, it also has affected truckers, for example, who have to pay significant amounts of carbon tax, which then, of course, is built into every single thing that we buy as Canadians. And so everything that we buy that comes on a truck, which is pretty much everything we purchase, is affected by the carbon tax, and therefore the price is, of course, passed on to consumers, because what else can you do when you're taxed by the government? At the end of the day, we all know there's only one taxpayer, and so all of those increased taxes end up flowing back to that taxpayer. People have also figured out, and I get this repeated back to me as well, that the carbon tax has impacted the cost of food in a big way. Because, I've heard examples of farmers. I have one right near Saskatoon that I spoke to that spends $20,000 a month on carbon tax. I've heard other stories from other ridings of farmers that spend in excess of $100,000 a month. And so once again, where do those costs go? Well, they get passed on to the consumer. And magically then the cost of food is much more. So these are the kinds of things that I've been hearing in Saskatoon. Now, interestingly, I did have the opportunity to travel to the Toronto region in the summer, and as I spoke to voters there, no surprise, I heard the same thing. I heard the same thing in Toronto. In fact, I heard the same thing in Scarborough. I was in Scarborough, and people there were all complaining to me about the cost of living, the cost of food, and they also clearly understood the connection between those increased costs and the carbon tax. And that is why on this motion here today, I think it's important that we tie this motion to the potential of a carbon tax election, because even in a place like Scarborough, I heard the same thing. I heard that people are tired. They're tired of the wording, again, that is in this motion, is tired, out of time, NDP Liberal coalition government. And those words are, you might just say, well, those are political talking points, conservative talking points. these are words that I heard from constituents, from people. People would tell me this. And so it's
Point
not...
of order, Madam Zahid.
Thank you, Chair. This is really irrelevant, like relating it to Scarborough. Like we are talking about lost Canadians, and like what I have been hearing from many constituents for many years is that that right is being taken away from those kids, those who are born outside. It has been a very big issue in our riding of Scarborough Centre. I've been hearing from lots of constituents, and I think we need to move quickly on that.
Madam Jahid, I have the floor, so I will give the floor to Mr. Reddycock.
So it's interesting, the Scarborough is very much affected by carbon tax, and many of your constituents.
Point of order, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, like how can we have like a binding motion for the next parliament? Like if after saying it after the election, we cannot give any instructions to the committee coming after the elections. How can we add that in a motion asking for the next election to do that? Because anything after the election will not.
This is debate, not a point of order.
Honourable members, please let the Conservatives talk, because if we want to have a debate, you can raise your hand. I will put you on the speaking list. But right now, I have the speaking list: Mr. Reddycock, this Mr. McLean, and Mr. Dalton, and I have no one else on the speaking list. I'll put Madam Kaibaga on the speaking list. But until then, please, unless there is an appropriate point of order, please do not debate this motion out of sequence. List, sure. I will add it to you. So now I will read the list again. So we have Mr. Reddycock have the floor, Mr. McLean, Mr. Dalton, Madam Kaibaga, and Madam Zahid. Anyone else want to be on the speaking list? If no one, then please, Mr. Reddycock, carry on.
Thank you. So back to Scarborough. So we know, I spoke to people in Scarborough, and I know this is where the member opposite is actually from Scarborough, so I know she's heard the same thing, because I didn't have to probe very hard to get this comment from people. And the people, not just in Saskatoon, not just in the GTA generally, but specifically in Scarborough, the Scarborough Centre there, were talking about this very issue. And so I feel...
So please, Madam Zahid, if there
we cannot go into lots of concerns we are hearing, like there are 1,000 concerns. I have been in Saskatoon and I have heard from caregivers about like having a new program for the caregivers, making sure that they are heard.
Are you going to keep cut the mic, please? The mic should be with me right now. Thank you. Sorry about this, honourable members. I know this is the first day after break. We are all energized, but I just please, I will give you that. I'll give you the point of order, but let me finish. Honestly, I tell you right now, I try to do a very fair, equitable job, and so please let me do that and continue to do that. And if there is a genuine point of order, I always welcome that. But please, no debate until you have your turn to speak. Okay. Anyone else on a point of order? No point of order. Then, Mr. Reddycock, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Well, clearly, Scarborough is a touchy issue, but the reality is the carbon tax has impacted Canadians right across the country, which includes Scarborough. And as I said, when I was in Scarborough, I was hearing all the time.
Chair, I've heard from Scarborough constituents a lot. I had a barbecue where there were over 4,000 people, and we have been having conversations on the doors, at events, Taste of Lawrence, Canada Day.
Madam Zahid, please, if I have your name on the list. When your turn comes in, you can speak about this. I humbly, I request you and that you will follow the direction from the chair, and I would really appreciate that. And I don't want any more interruption unless Mr. Reddycock is really going off the tangent, which I don't see him yet. And Mr. Reddycock, please go ahead.
So again, we're on the subject of carbon tax, and I was just talking about and we know that the carbon tax, what we have here, and I'll read it again because this is a sub-amendment that we have to this motion, and the sub-amendment adds these words, and after a carbon tax election is held so that Canadians and Quebecois can vote out this tired, out-of-time NDP Liberal coalition government. That is the sub-amendment that we're speaking to. And so, you know, I was just talking about Scarborough and how people, even in Scarborough, much to the surprise of the member for Scarborough, actually complain about the carbon tax and the way that it's impacting the costs of the food that they are eating and the things that they're purchasing, and just the struggling and the suffering that people are feeling, where they don't have the money in their bank accounts at the end of the month to pay the bills that they need to pay, because one of the reasons is the cost of food and other things that have been impacted by carbon
It is
tax.
about relevance to this committee. We are not in an environment committee. We are in citizenship immigration committee, and it's important to discuss the immigration cases, immigration issues in this committee, rather than we have a committee where like they can look into the carbon tax, but we are right now in same committee, and it's important that we talk about the issues which are relevant to same committee.
Jahid, I have called the sub-amendment in order, and Mr. Reddycop is speaking on that sub-amendment, and I don't see that he's not speaking out of order. So, Mr. Reddycop, please carry on.
So, what Canadians have told me, and why I keep coming back to the carbon tax and why we think it's relevant to add into this motion, is the opportunity to have an election based on the carbon tax. That is what people are telling me. I believe that's what Canadians want the opportunity to do. My colleague mentioned a very interesting thing. He mentioned, first of all, that many of the provinces are, I think it might be all of them now, are opposed to the carbon tax. But most specifically and most interestingly, British Columbia. And I just want to highlight that point, because British Columbia was really the birthplace of the carbon tax. It's where it first started, where it was first implemented. And it's so interesting how right now...
Point of order again from Madam Kaibaga. Please go ahead.
Chair,
I have almost 7 minutes to finish this committee.
Mr. Chair, I called the point of
Madam
order.
Kaibaga, please go ahead.
I go back to the point that this sub-amendment is out of order because it seeks to direct a future committee to report on something that the House and you cannot bind in a future parliament. This makes no sense. We're sitting here discussing Bill C-71, and you're entertaining a motion to direct a future parliament, something that you yourself cannot do as chair, Mr. Chair, respectfully.
Madam Kaibaga,
how do we continue this debate?
Madam Kaibaga, committee is in control of its own things, and it does not. We do not direct the parliament what to do at this point in time.
A future parliament, like.
And let me, if some of the members do not like, what is in the or do not support what is in the sub-amendment, they can vote it down when the debate collapses. So right now, I have 6 minutes. Mr. Reddycop, the floor is still with you, unless you want to bring. Only way it can end is the adjournment from Mr. Reddycop.
I have more to say.
Continue.
I know this seems like a very touchy issue to the members across from me, but I just want to remind them that it wasn't that long ago, back in June, when there were members on your side, Mr. Chang particularly, was telling us great stories. And I recall a wonderful story, not a wonderful story, an interesting story about a car accident, right? And I'm still a little confused as to how he didn't inform his wife about that in a timely manner, and I'm confused how you didn't get into trouble for that. So I think I might need some marital advice from you, because it seems like you cracked the code there somehow. But anyway, my point is that when all of that was going on, and it went on and on and on, we didn't disrupt Mr. Chang. We let him speak and tell his story, and so yeah, we actually are concerned about. So I think we gave you that courtesy. So. I was speaking about British Columbia and the carbon tax, and how interesting it is to me that the birthplace of the carbon tax in Canada actually has now said that they would rather do something different. They have recognized that the carbon tax is actually a problem. It's a little ironic, because as we all know, there's an election happening in British Columbia, and so it's ironic that the NDP, no less, would suggest that the carbon tax is a bad thing. So it proves a couple things. It proves that the carbon tax is, in fact, a very bad tax. It costs everybody a lot of money and makes life very expensive, makes everything unaffordable, and it actually doesn't help the environment. And I think it also, we can learn from that people actually can learn and evolve on their thinking. And so I'm encouraged, I guess, that even an NDP premier and NDP government can actually see the light and understand that maybe there are other ways to accomplish things, and that sometimes you get your head so buried in one particular issue that you forget about that. And so that's what the carbon tax has become for the NDP. It's become a liability, become a huge liability. And so that's, I just find that interesting. And so that's, I think, why in many places across Canada, I think every province now, and pretty much anywhere you go to speak, you will find many people who are very much struggling with the carbon tax and very interested in having a say, in having a chance to speak to it through an election, to tell the government of Canada what they think about a carbon tax. And I'm pretty confident that I know the answer to that question, but the only way to know for sure is to have a carbon tax election. And so that's why we have this motion that we add to this, or this sub-amendment, I'm sorry, that we would add to this motion that would say to report this to the House after a carbon tax election is held, so that Canadians and Quebecois can vote out this tired, out-of-time NDP Liberal coalition government. And this is, as I said, this is what I'm hearing from people, and this is what people are wanting to see. And so with that, I will end my time, and we can move on to the next speaker on the list. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, go ahead, please. You have about 3 minutes right now before either we suspend the meeting or
say what I have to say about this, and I support this motion very much. The sub-amendment to the motion that's on the table here. I think that anybody that hasn't paid attention to the fact that Canadians want an election on the carbon tax at this point in time has clearly not paid attention to the constituents all summer long. Being out there, I can guarantee I've been at numerous fairs, and it is no longer anything about the issues. It's, can you please get rid of these people who are making life more expensive, primarily through the carbon tax? And I challenge my Liberal colleagues across the table, as long as my NDP colleagues, are you actually this tone deaf that you don't want to put this in front of Canadians and continue to keep your feet in the sand and pretend that this is not the major issue facing Canadians today, and that they actually want to have a say in how they're paying these taxes? And we've had the Parliamentary Budget Officer here give clear indications that the government is misleading Canadians for a long time now about how much this tax is actually costing them. And that's where a political price is going to be paid. That's one of the reasons Canadians are fed up. If you told Canadians that this is what this tax is costing you, this is how much inflation it is costing you, this is what it's doing to your buying power as far as what you can buy in groceries, what you can buy in everything else that's supplied in society, because everything has a carbon footprint, then they would accept that as being honest and being forward-looking as far as what they can do to help the environment. But they have been completely misled, and now Canadians across the country are well aware of that. They know that they've been misled about the cost of this carbon tax, and they see it in the price of everything, the inflation that's gone up, the mounting deficits that this government is running, and they definitely want their say on that. And their say in a democracy happens in an election. I know people are pounding the pavement in Calgary Centre saying, please do something to stop this government from moving forward any further on this. The tone deafness of this government is beyond the pale. And I think that this motion, the sub-amendment to the motion, Mr. Chair, exemplifies that very clearly. Let's get to an election on this issue, because you cannot continue to divide Canadians around other issues when this is the major issue facing them, their pocketbooks, their families, their jobs, their lifestyles, their homes, their food, for so long now. Can we please move forward and actually get this sub-amendment passed so that we can deal with this in a proper way an election for all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. I have one more minute. No, the floor I'm going to give it to is Mr. Dalton.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as a member from British Columbia, as you are also, can't express in a sufficient way, I would guess the pain that British Columbians are feeling economically, and they're feeling it from all sides. They're feeling with the housing costs, they're feeling with taxation, they're feeling it, but the carbon tax really just highlights it, and it's like the tip of the spear. And
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président. Oui, je trouve ça dommage.
Well, it's really unfortunate because this is a very important file for me personally. It doesn't apply to Quebec, but it's 5:30. Thank you.
It's
Unanimous consent to allow Mr. Dalton to finish, please.
Mr. Dalton, I'm going to suspend the meeting unless you want to bring a motion to adjourn the meeting, because the floor is with you.
yes, we adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn. There is a motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor? All in favor? Anyone against? Anyone against? I'll ask the clerk to take a vote quickly.
So the motion is to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Ali? Mr. Ali? Mr.
One
Ali?
second.
Motion is to adjourn the meeting.
Nope.
Mr. Chang? No. Monsieur El Khoury?
No.
Madame Kayabaga?
No.
Ms. Zaid?
No.
Mr. Kimmich?
Yes.
Mr. Dalton?
We.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Mr. Riddicup?
Yes.
Monsieur Brunel-Duceppe?
Oui.
Ms. Kwan? Ms. Kwan?
No.
Okay, so the meeting.
Just a second.
Chair? I'll move a motion to
Yeah.
suspend.
Yeah, okay. So
Okay, so the motion to adjourn the meeting is defeated, so I'm going to suspend the meeting. Meeting is suspended.
Thank you.
Thank you.